The morning was dark and unfriendly. Clouds hung low over the city, threatening to rain at any second. There was a sense of unease in the air, the very feeling that Detective Maxfer had learned to recognize over the years. He was sitting in his office, staring into a cup of cooling coffee, when the phone rang. "Maxfer, we have a new body," Captain Reed's voice sounded strained. And it seemed to be him again. The detective froze for a moment. "Are you sure?" he asked, already knowing the answer he was about to hear. "Come to the park outside of town. See for yourself." 20 minutes later, Maxfer was walking through the wet grass, approaching the crime scene. The body lay by an old abandoned fountain. A man in his 30s, cleanly dressed, but no ID. There was a neat surgical incision in the chest area. "Just like before," Maxfer muttered, leaning closer. It was his handwriting. The black surgeon killed the same way 3 years ago. Then suddenly disappeared, leaving the police without a single lead. Maxfer remembered every detail of that case, every mistake, every unresolved issue. "Maybe a copycat?" suggested one of the officers, watching the detective. "Maybe," Maxfer replied thoughtfully. "But if it's a copycat, how does he know the details that have not been published? If it's the killer himself, then he never left. Then he's been here all along." The autopsy revealed that the victim died from a precise blow to the heart. No fingerprints, no personal effects, everything was sterile. The unsub seemed to know what he was doing. But there was one thing that stuck out. "They found microparticles of tissue under his fingernails," said the expert. "He tried to resist." "So he knew the killer," Maxfer nodded. The victim was soon identified. The man was a doctor working in a city clinic. However, there was one nuance. According to the official data, this man died 3 years ago. "You mean we're standing next to a dead body right now?" Captain Reed squinted his eyes. "Technically, yes," Maxfer replied, looking at the old photograph. The case was beginning to make frightening sense. If this man was a dead man, then someone had purposely erased him from the system. But why? And most importantly, who had done it? Maxfer returned to the precinct and requested access to the archives. He needed to understand what had happened 3 years ago when the black surgeon had suddenly disappeared. The deeper he dug, the more strange things he found. Among the documents, he came across a detention report of a man who was considered a suspect at the time. But he was soon released and the case was closed. "What made us think he was innocent?" the detective asked Reed. The captain hesitated. "As I recall, there wasn't enough evidence against him. Everything pointed to someone else." "Who, exactly?" Reed shrugged his shoulders. "We never found out. Evidence disappeared, witnesses refused to talk. And then the killings stopped." Maxfer reread the report again. The name of the detainee looked familiar. He ran it through the database and froze. This man worked at the same clinic where the last victim was listed as dead. Was it a coincidence? Or was someone trying to cover up the truth by replacing one dead guy with another? Maxfer didn't like coincidences. They rarely turned out to be coincidental. The name of the detainee from 3 years ago never left his mind. The man was Daniel Foster, a surgeon with an impeccable reputation who had suddenly disappeared from the city after being accused of a series of murders. At the time, the police had found no evidence, and he'd been released. Maxfer remembered the case. It left a residue. "Find me everything you can on Foster," he ordered his assistant, holding out an old report. A couple hours later, the results were on his desk. Foster had disappeared. After the case was closed, he'd left and never resurfaced anywhere else. No job, no registration, no bank accounts. It's like he vanished. But there was one detail. 2 months ago, someone with his old passport checked into a hotel on the outskirts of town. Maxfer went there. The hotel was a small, semi-dark place with shabby carpets and a peeling front desk. An elderly receptionist came out to greet him. "I'm sorry, but we don't have any guests," he mumbled, casting a disgruntled glance at the detective. "And 2 months ago?" Maxfer said, pulling an old photo of Daniel Foster out of his pocket. "Had you seen this man?" The receptionist frowned, examining the photo. "Maybe. Someone similar lived with us. But he didn't give his name. Did he leave anything behind?" He scratched the back of his head, thinking. "Yeah. Our mates found something under the bed." He pulled out a small plastic bag. Maxfer unwrapped it. Inside was a medical gown. The snow-white fabric was stained with brown stains. Blood. Forensics confirmed it. The blood on the robe belonged to the last victim. It was proof that Foster was back in town. But why was he back? Maxfer sat in his office, surrounded by old interrogation reports. He reread Foster's words over and over again. He claimed he was innocent, that he'd been framed. If that was true, then who was the real killer? Another name popped into the detective's head: Dr. Miles Grayson. He worked at the same clinic as Foster. In fact, he was the one who first told the police that Foster was a maniac. What if he was wrong? Maxfer decided to pay Grayson a visit. The doctor's house was in an upscale neighborhood. High fence, well-kept garden, expensive car in the driveway. But the door was open. There was a metallic smell inside. Blood. There was a body in the living room, right on the floor. It was Dr. Grayson. Maxfer bent over the body. Death was clean. No sign of struggle. Just a thin incision in the neck, made with surgical precision. The technique, familiar. "It's him again," the detective muttered. But something was wrong. The perpetrator hadn't taken the evidence. Grayson's cell phone lay on the table next to the body. The screen was shattered, but one message still burned on the display. "You're wrong. I'm not who I seem to be." Maxfer read the words. If Grayson wasn't the killer, then he'd been taken out for knowing the truth. But then why had he accused Foster 3 years ago? And who was really behind the murders? The detective felt like a fool. He was sure he'd finally figured it out. But now he realized someone was just playing him. Playing him very skillfully. Everything was coming together in a strange pattern. Maxfer stood in Grayson's living room while forensics photographed the body and collected evidence. If Foster was the killer, why would he kill Grayson after he returned? If he wasn't the killer, then who had been behind the crimes all along? Grayson's cell phone is the only clue. Maxfer opened his call log. Last call. 2 hours ago. The number's been suppressed. But something caught the detective's eye. In the phone's notes, he found a strange entry. "I need to tell the truth. It's him. Not Daniel. It's him. Him. But who?" Reed walked over to Maxfer and held up the lab report to him. "We got something," the captain said, crossing his arms. "We found fingerprints on Grayson's cell phone." Maxfer glanced at the paper, and his heart sank. The prints belonged to Grayson himself. What the dash? The detective reread the report. "Wait," the CSI intervened, "here's the best part. We found another set of prints. On the table leg, Maxfer felt a chill run down his spine. He knew that set of prints. It was Foster's. So he was here. But why had he left the prints on the table and not on Grayson's body? And that's when Maxfer realized Foster's not the killer. He found the body first. Maxfer rushed for the exit. If Foster is innocent, the killer is still out there. But who? Remembering Grayson's note, he started going through everyone connected to the case. And one detail struck him like a bolt of lightning. All the victims worked at the same clinic. Except for one person. Someone who was around, but who no one noticed. Someone who was trusted. Maxfer realized who it was. He stopped abruptly, grabbed his phone, and dialed Reed's number. "Find the clinic administrator," he ordered. What the hell? The captain wondered. Because everyone was looking in the wrong place. Maxfer rushed to the car. The clinic was already closing, but he was in time. There, at the end of the hallway, stood an unassuming man with glasses. "Detective Maxfer," he smiled. "You finally figured it out." "It was you." "Of course it was. I've always been around." The administrator. No one suspected him. Until it was too late. Did you like the story? Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new investigations. I'm always putting in the effort for you, and your support means a lot. Leave a comment, I'd love to hear your thoughts.